Hello everyone, this is Pearson Stack, and this is my internship with Soul Construction LLC. Who is Soul Construction? We are a maritime construction company that mainly focuses on commercial and larger residential jobs. We commonly use heavy equipment, barges, and many different sea vessels to complete our work. In the picture on the left, you can see our Traco sitting on 6 of our 10 by 40 foot barges that have been all pegged together and then put crane mats on top. And then there's a tugboat from the Pensacola port that we're using to move our barge to and from the job site. And on the picture on the right, you can see our main crane, which is stationed at our yard over on Interlaken Street. The projects. So each week I would be assigned to a different job depending on where my assistance was needed or where my skills were applicable. Some of the different jobs that I worked on at my time here at Soul Construction would be FPL's Crisp Plant Area 2, FPL's Crisp Plant Area 3, and Star Lake, where we put in a stone bulkhead, and the yard, where I would do either office work or I'd learn about office work, and then I would work on boats and other repairs at the yard. So we had equipment that needs to be repaired. I'm usually the guy that does it. And on the right, you can see a picture of a northern water snake. It's a pretty common occurrence on our jobs at FPL. There's a lot of creatures in the water over there. We've seen gators, we've seen sharks, all sorts of different things swimming around in the water. So it's important to stay alert when you're out there. FPL Area 2. If you have been to the old Crisp Plant power plant, then you know that much of the infrastructure is from the 60s. The plant itself is built right along the water and has many areas separated by steel sheet piles and concrete structures that keep the water from eroding the land. One such area that needed a new sheet wall and concrete cap was this triangular pond in the left photo. Not only that, but the land that supported the pipe bridge was starting to erode. A new embankment of concrete was to be made to keep the sediment where it is. On this picture on the left, you can see I drew a straight red line, and that signifies where the sheet wall and concrete cap goes. There's a greenish blue line that signifies where a floating dock would go, and the 6 circles are the riser piles for the floating dock. And then the squiggly red line area is where the concrete embankment was poured. So there's another better picture in the next slide. So you can see that we did more than just that, what I previously stated. We actually started out this project by dredging. We dredged out the entire highlighted area in this picture. Now, this is a intake pond for the cooling system of the power plant, so it's really important that they can get maximum flow. After years of hurricanes and winds and water and all sorts of erosion, tons of sediment has just piled up inside this pond. And whereas it was like 2 or 3 foot deep in some areas, we got it down to 10 foot in the entire area. So we did a pretty good job with that. It took a lot longer than expected, but we did it. And then, like I said, we drove in a new sheet wall, about 140 foot of steel sheets, and then put a concrete cap on top of that. That is signified by the red line. And then the green area is the concrete embankment, which we actually used it's like a pillow sack type of tarp that goes there, and when you pump it full of concrete, it expands in certain areas, and certain areas are left voided of concrete, but it ultimately makes like a huge net of concrete that will eventually keep the sediment in place. So it was pretty cool to see that happen. And then after all that, we put in the floating dock sections, we put in the 6 piles, we put in the pile protector covers, and then we put in some gangways so that you can access the floating dock at no matter what height the tide is. Now, at Area 2, the concrete cap wall and wall that we were putting in were pretty much right at the water level, or like a foot below it. So a lot of the work that we had to do ended up being in the water. As you can see, the soffit for the concrete cap here in the middle picture is actually submerged in water. So you can imagine that placing all of the brackets and I-beams that soffit lays on top of was kind of a pain because, well, we were pretty much fully submerged in the water. The picture on the left is of our rebar cages. Now we've got 10 bars, a number 6 rebar, tied in with number 4 stirrups every 1 foot all the way down. So there's about 108 stirrups, 106, 108 stirrups in there, and a lot of rebar and a lot of ties. So that was pretty cool to see happen, pretty cool to do. I definitely feel like I could be a rod buster now because of all the rebar and tying that I've done. This picture on the top right is pretty awesome, I like to think. That's a 600-ton crane that we rented from Deep South Cranes for the day to fly our 160-ton excavator onto the barge so that we could dredge in there and drive all our sheets down there and help with using the pump truck. And then on the bottom right, you can actually see on the day of the pour where we're pouring concrete along in our cap. And right here at the end where we're all standing, there was a little bit of a problem. We didn't foresee that there was a hole in the existing sheets. Now we ended up using about 110 yards of flowable fill in between the old wall and the new wall, which was not like unforeseen. We had actually bid that in the project, and some of that fill had gone down in this hole, but we didn't realize it until we were pouring the cap. Now what we did while we were waiting on like the last 5 yards, we just stuffed a bunch of stay form, which is like a metal mesh material, and concrete center blocks down in that hole to stop it up so that our concrete would stop flowing in there. And then I wish I had a finished product picture, but everything looked great in the end. We finished it off and we troweled it and screeded it and everything was nice. So that was that project. Now FPL Area 3, this is pretty similar to the last one except for we're out of the water. This area is centered around an old stormwater runoff pond and an overflow basin that has since deteriorated and eroded away much of the surrounding land. The idea is to contain the runoff and add a monitoring device between these 2 steel walls that will help check the water quality and the storm runoff, and maybe check the erosion too because it's pretty bad over there. This picture on the bottom left, as you can see, is our fully formed up soffit, walls, kickers, rebar, everything pretty much ready to pour the concrete. The picture on the right is about 2 weeks before while we were still driving sheets, and I dug out a little trench for where this stay form wall would go right here on the land, and the rest of it we used hanging brackets and I-beams, which we nailed our soffit to. Here's a few more pictures of Area 3. The picture all the way on the left is of our form ready to get poured. You can see there's actually the pump truck right there stretching out to reach our form, so that's pretty cool. The picture in the middle is the finished product, and the picture on the right is moments before we started pouring. You can actually see the hose of the pump truck hanging down right next to the form, so it's a pretty cool picture as well. Star Lake. This is one of our jobs that was ongoing while we worked at FPL, so we've got about 13 guys that kind of just move around on the different projects depending on what we need. You know, it's a mix of sea captains, welders, foremen, operators, laborers, electricians, carpenters, you know, you name it. We're kind of a ragtag bunch of guys, you know, with different skills, and we all come together and do a job. So this is one of the jobs we were doing while we were working at FPL, and this is a residential job. So this is the only residential job I worked on during my time at Soul Construction, and we installed a limestone bulkhead across 2 properties on Star Lake Drive. There were many steps to this project. This included grubbing and deforesting, excavation, jetting and hammering PVC sheets into the ground, designing and installing a whaler system, as well as tiebacks, and finally installing a deck on top of the wall. Now, in that last photo, that little hot dog, that red area, is actually where we're doing it. If you look on Google Earth, that's our property, and that's where we were doing it. Now, here's a really cool video of us hammering in these sheets, and me on the left, I'm using the jet pump to kind of stir up the soil and dirt and sand below so that we could hammer in these sheet piles really easily. So there's a cool video. I'll show you. That it may seem that I'm right underneath that excavator's bucket, but I'm not. I'm actually a couple sheets down the wall, so it's a little bit safer than it appears. And I do have ear protection in. It's just earplugs. It's hard to tell, but we did about, I want to say, like 90 of these PVC sheets, and we did about 160 feet of wall and about 2 sections of 10-foot going back. So this little 90-degree section in the wall, we did about 2 of those. And overall, it went really well. So the rocks right here next to me are the existing bulkhead, and where I'm standing is where all the rocks that we're going to place in are going to go, all the way down the length of the wall. But initially we put in a barrier down, so after we excavated and flattened out the area, we put this barrier down, and then we put pea gravel, and then we put larger stones and limestone rock on there, and then we put like size 2 and size 3 rocks on there, and we just kept piling it up and evening it out all the way down the wall until it was pretty much finished. And then we installed a whaler on the back and front side of this sheet. You can see one on the back right here. This is more of the template, but we installed 2x12s all the way down the length of the wall. We put 2 on the face of it towards the water and 1 on the face of it towards the land, and we through bolted them, and then we actually put 12 timber piles down in the ground and used all thread to string tiebacks down to our timber piles. That way we could adjust the wall a little bit after we added the stone, so we could bring it in or push it out a little bit. And then we made the wooden deck on top of the whalers, and that was pretty much simple. You just cut wood and nail it down, but everything else was pretty new to me. So the yard. At the yard, I did some office work. I got to watch my boss do some submittals and do some of the legal documentation that you have to do, like pulling permits and such. But most of the time I spent at the yard was repairing boats and equipment like fuel cells. So a lot of the pictures you see here are boat related. So on the top left, this is a switch panel design that I laid out. I had to redo a lot of the switches for the boats that I worked on. The picture right next to it, to the right of that, is of a steering unit where the steering wheel basically turns the steering cable so that your outboard engine can move back and forth. This one was pretty, it was in pretty bad shape. It was destroyed. A lot of the cogs on the gear had been stripped off. And here's another picture of the same boat. It's a Boston whaler with the steering unit in my hand and the cable coming off of it. This picture on the bottom left is of a fiberglass damage ding sort of deal in the chime of an Azure. It's a boat that's got a front seating area. And then as you can see, as we work our way across the left to the right, I built up the damaged area with some resin that I mixed with colloidal silica to make like a putty, and I mixed that in there, and then I glassed over that with about 4 sheets of glass, sanded it down, and then I did a little gel coat repair, which I also sanded down, but I don't have a finished product photo. I've got more yard project pictures. This is from electrical I did on a couple of boats. The Azure that I did the fiberglass repair on, I had also sunk, so none of the electrical on it worked. I had to redo all of the switches, all of the breakers, rewire the power, clean off the battery switches, redo pumps, redo quick connects, do a lot of new grounds and new power wires. I did some fancy stuff with the bilge pump and the float switches. I made it so that it was a quick connect. Basically, if one of them stopped working while the owner was out on his boat, he could quickly reconnect a new switch or pump, which I had stowed on his boat. So it's pretty cool. These are some switches and fuses I put in, and this is a really cool picture of a bird that I found. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you want to go into the maritime construction industry and it interests you at all, then reach out and apply at Soul Construction, because we need more people and it's a great company to work with.